Hello, it's Natasha, and welcome to the last episode of this season of Animal Amazement. On this episode, we're looking at bonobos. These are probably the most human-like animals out there. Bonobos live in matriarchal societies and they use complex vocal sounds to communicate. Bonobos are sometimes called pygmy chimpanzees, but they're actually a completely separate species from chimps. They're a little bit smarter and less aggressive, and some people say that they're our closest living relative. In a series of games pitting chimpanzees against bonobos, the bonobos won 4-2, and the chimps were described as babies who like new toys but got bored pretty quickly. The bonobos were better at working together and at solving puzzles and using tools. Bonobos are known as free-loving hippies, but it's a little more complicated than that. They can be really aggressive, although they are a little less aggressive than chimps and more cooperative. They're also nicer to strangers. Bonobos will share their food with other bonobos that they've never met. And yawning is a sign of empathy among humans and other great apes. And bonobos will yawn in response to a stranger's yawn just as much as a friend's yawn, whereas chimps will only yawn in response to a yawn of someone in their own group. Bonobos are pretty human-like. They're comfortable walking upright, and they do so a lot in captivity. And their muscle structure is a little more similar to ours than chimps are. Bonobos have also passed the mirror test, and they're great at using tools. They'll use moss as sponges and twigs as toothpicks, and they'll even make rain hats out of leaves. Young bonobos like to play sophisticated games like King of the Mountain and Blind Man's Bluff, where they'll cover their eyes and then chase each other around. And even adult bonobos continue to play well into adulthood, which is pretty rare in the animal kingdom. They also have an active imagination. They like to play make-believe. The most famous bonobo is Kanzi, who grew up in research centers between Georgia and Iowa. And he likes to hide invisible objects under blankets and leaves and will come back later and pretend to eat them. And sometimes he'll offer these objects up to his caregivers and see what they do with it, which is something that little kids like to do a lot. Other apes besides humans and bonobos have active imaginations as well. One chimpanzee named Vicky, who grew up in captivity surrounded by a lot of toys, including the kinds that you pull on a string, invented her own little invisible pull toy, and she would walk around dragging it around, and it would get stuck, and she would tug on it until it got unstuck, and she would even involve her caregivers in the game. And the famous gorilla Coco liked to act out scenarios with her dolls. She would sign commands to them and then have them do it. And one time when shown a picture of a butterfly in a magazine, she pointed at it and said that she was a butterfly. And when probed on it a few times, she eventually signed the word clown and said that she knew she was a gorilla, so she was just joking. Bonobos are also musical. They can understand rhythm, and they can play the bongo, matching the tempo and beat of the music played by their researchers. Bonobos are really good at communicating, especially with humans, and they're great learners. Kanzi surprised researchers when he learned to speak using lexicograms, which are symbols that represent words and concepts, on a computer. The surprising part is that they weren't trying to teach him. They were trying to teach his mother, who showed little interest and struggled a bit. But he was able to pick up on her lessons and surpass her. When he heard a word in English, he could point to the right lexigram on the keyboard. He now knows about 500 words using that lexigram, and he understands about 3,000 spoken English words. This shows that just like humans, bonobos are able to learn different languages if they start earlier on in life. Kanzi is also able to use lexicograms to create simple sentences and new words for concepts that are not on the keyboard. For example, he calls kale slow lettuce because it looks like lettuce, but it's hard and slow to chew. His sister Panvenetia also learned to use lexicograms, and during a flood, she kind of freaked out and she was pointing at big water because there was no word for flood, and electricity and shock, because she thought that there was going to be some kind of electrical issue because of the flood. Kanzi also learned some sign language by watching videos of Coco the gorilla. Kanzi is also like a bilingual person. He can speak both Bonobo and English. In one experiment, he and his sister Panbenicia were placed in 2 separate rooms, and Kanzi was shown some yogurt. He then produced some bonobo vocalizations that his sister could hear, and she pointed at the lexigram for yogurt. Bonobos don't have the right vocal tract and the physical ability to speak like humans, but Kanzi has apparently tried vocalizing some words in English. He can also understand the context and the syntax of commands given to him by researchers, even without being able to see his researchers, so without any visual cues. Probably the most amazing thing Kanzi can do is cook. While out in the woods, he pointed at the lexigram symbols for marshmallows and fire. And the researchers gave him some marshmallows, he gathered up some twigs, they gave him a match, and he lit the fire and then toasted some marshmallows on a stick. He also apparently likes to make omelets in the kitchen, and he'll ask for the ingredients using his lexigrams. Kanzi and the other bonobos like to watch movies that they can pick from using buttons on a computer screen, and their favorites are Tarzan, Quest for Fire, and other movies that show humans and animals working together. Kanzi has also been taught to play Pac-Man, and I think he's beaten level 1. And there's a video out there about his sister learning to drive a golf cart. Panbenicia died in 2012, but as far as I know, Kanzi is still alive. He is 39 now and living at the Ape Cognition and Conservation Initiative in Iowa. Something I find really fascinating about bonobos is how their skulls look a lot like Homo erectus, which was an early human species that we evolved from. That and the fact that they can learn to cook and talk shows that they're not that far away from humans. Actually, one study led by archaeologists tried to compare Kanzi's cognitive and mechanical abilities to that of Homo habilis, another early human ancestor that created early Stone Age tools like stone flakes and cores. They taught Kanzi how to flake stone to create an edge sharp enough to cut through rope, and then they put some food in a box with a clear lid and tied the lid shut. They also gave him some stones. Kanzi not only learned how to flake, but he also invented his own method of doing so, and was able to cut through the rope. However, the flakes that he made were a little cruder than the ones that Homo habilis made. Overall, I think bonobos are one of my favorite animals and definitely one of the most fascinating. So I hope that you enjoyed learning about these amazing animals, and I hope you enjoyed this whole series. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more stuff. In another anecdote that I read, this guy came to visit the facility where the bonobos are kept, and he performed a Maori war dance, which most of the bonobos freaked out about. They saw it as a threat, and Kanzi was the only one who stayed calm, and he apparently called the researcher over and told her that he wanted the man to perform the dance for him in another room out back so that the other bonobos wouldn't be upset. And the man kind of hesitantly followed them back into the other room, and when they got there, Kanzi started imitating the dance and kind of asking him to start it all over again, and this time he joined in.